I don't know if it's that nice. Someone said it's a damn nice chair. I don't know if I agree with that. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. All right, 7 to 1. So let's get started. So hello everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying the beginning of Hack the North and Gear Up. Today I'm going to be talking about. I guess I'll address the headline: 1.1 million at 19. I'm going to be talking about the Zipcall story, how I built a video calling app on my couch in my living room and scaled it to 250,000 users in 6 months and sold to an American tech company. So just a quick agenda. First, I'm going to talk about my background and perhaps why you even want to listen to me, the why of Zipcall and why I thought the world needed it, or at least why I thought I needed it, the minimum viable product or MVP that I wanted to start out building. I actually went about implementing it and researching it and getting it to the world, sharing it with everyone, getting their thoughts and feedback, tuning up the product, and lastly, some concluding lessons I think everyone can hopefully take away from this. So quickly, my name's Ian. I'm 20 years old. I built Zipcall and sold it when I was 19, so a little bit late. I'm a computer science student at the University of Waterloo. I started coding when I was 14, and I was exceptionally bad. I failed my first few programming assignments back in high school. I've interned at places like Deloitte, Accenture, Shopify, and I'm incoming at Coinbase. So at the end, feel free to ask me about software engineering internships or anything like that. And I am the founder and sole software engineer of Zipcall, the platform I was talking about earlier. So the first myth that I want to get out of the way right up front is that you need to be a coding genius to do this type of stuff, to build a startup, to raise capital. And that is just absolutely not true. I have a lot of friends in Waterloo Computer Science who are pretty technical, and I don't think many of them would describe me as some type of coding prodigy. Probably quite the contrary. And I think this is very important to understand because in computer science, there's a pretty big barrier to entry. You see people hiding behind their terminals, using Vim with all these complicated editors. And it's kind of like, what's going on here? When in reality, most of it just is stuff that you can learn on the internet pretty easily. So that's the first thing I want to address right off the bat. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I built Zipcall, because the why is just as important as how, in my opinion. The first is I really hated having to download complicated software like Zoom. I realized this very early on in the pandemic when I was getting very lonely and I wanted to call my friends. And I realized having to download Skype and sign up for Microsoft ID and give my phone number, no phone number. I was like, man, this sucks. This is not enjoyable. There really should be a better way. The same way that when you want to edit a Word document, you don't download Microsoft Office and sign up for an Office 365 subscription and download the document, open it. You shouldn't have to do it for a video call. You just use Google Docs. And I hadn't found anything for that for video calling. It just worked in the browser. The second is that video and audio lag really, really sucks. The ideal product for what I wanted, especially for video calling, is something that you don't notice. It just lets people communicate. I hadn't found that yet. And lastly, no video calling experience was seamless. There was nothing I could just use with my grandmother or my mom, who, God bless her, is not very technically savvy. And from here, I started to define my minimum viable product. The first thing I knew is it had to support 2 people. Multi-party calling is great, but it's a very complicated problem to solve from a technical perspective. And I have the statistics that show that 80 to 90% of video calls are just between 2 people. So that's what I wanted to start out with, and perhaps I could consider expanding that later. Next, it had to be grandma-proof. And this is the term that I coined because I lived with my grandmother for 10 years, and she's turning 80 pretty soon. And there was absolutely no way that she could ever download Zoom and sign in and set up her microphone. So that was not an option. And both of these led me to the conclusion that it had to be web-based. So these are my constraints when I was building Zipcall, and this is kind of what I was looking to create. Which leads me to my second myth, is that you must find product market fit right away. And I don't think this is very true, and here's why. While it's great if you have a lot of theory to back up what it is you're building and why you're building it and who's going to use it and how they're going to use it, I think a lot of times most people who are successful don't actually know what they're doing, and I think they just got lucky. And you don't want to bias too heavily towards spending all of your time thinking in that theoretical stage when you could just be shipping something. I had no idea Zipcall would get popular for the reasons it did. I couldn't have predicted half of this feedback that I got. So just launching something and getting it out into the world is probably the most important thing that you can do. Next, I'm going to talk about building it. This is a step that I think is one thing that, especially when you're starting out in computer science, can be fairly confusing. Because it's one thing to say, all right, I don't like video calling software. I really want to build something that addresses this need. How do I actually do it? So there's a bit of a disconnect there, and I hope to break it down here a bit. So first step that I would normally go to is research. What is your problem? Or I should say, you have your idea, you have your problem, but what technologies out there that can help you solve it? So for me, this generally will just look, this will just resemble me going onto Google or going onto GitHub and searching video calling app, video calling free software, and just trying to see what's out there. Is this even technically feasible? Do the technologies exist? And through this process, for me personally, I learned things like WebRTC, Twilio services, and a whole bunch of other things that were actually very beneficial to me. And this let me conclude, okay, this is something that's actually feasible given my current resources. It's not going to take me and a team of 5 guys or girls or whoever 3 years to come up with a solution. This is something that's actually I can actually do and accomplish. The second step is to run something. And this is, in my opinion, equally critical. This, for Zipcall anyways, looked like me going to GitHub and running about 10 different projects that tried to do something somewhat similar to what I wanted to do, but in different capacities. And here you're looking for things that are the right level of complexity, the right size, the right languages, and perform virtually what it is that you want in different pieces, that is. And once you have something running, you're about halfway there. Like that's half the battle, in my opinion. And the third step is to deconstruct what it is you've just run. This might look like deleting files, changing config variables here and there, trying to just see how stuff works. But this is the approach that I normally take when it comes to learning something, rather than trying to go to the docs and read about it and learn everything. Because when you do that, you risk learning and wasting a lot of time on something that might not even work. And you learn things that you might not even need to worry about. And that's just the reality of it. When it comes to computer science, I think open source is extremely powerful, and it's something that we can leverage. Why would I want to learn something from scratch and do everything myself when I can use the knowledge of 10,000 previous developers who've written guides and made projects and hosted them, put them on the internet and documented them for me? So that's kind of the logic here. And the last step is to customize. Figure out what parts and pieces you want to steal from different projects and mash it all together. Change it to your own needs, fit it to your own product. And I want to be very clear, this whole pipeline isn't just one thing for Zipcall. Like I promise, Zipcall isn't just some project I cloned and changed the name. This is for generally individual features and technical subproblems. So if I want to solve, let's say, how do I do in browser text chat? Is there some way to do that? And I can find some really small project that'll do that. I can run it. I can deconstruct it and figure out exactly what each file is doing and kind of get a general understanding of it without having to read all the documentation. And they can customize it and add it to Zipcall. Maybe some people call this thievery. I prefer to call it advanced sharing, but it's the reality of open source. And this leads me to my third myth, is that you need to understand the ins and outs of your technologies to build something great. This is absolutely not true. And this one really pisses me off because, especially when I was pretty clueless and a lot younger in my computer science career, I found that there's a lot of very arrogant people who came off as very elite, that they were some domain expert in this field and they are the arbiter of knowledge and you don't know anything. When in reality, most things for computer science is just a Google away. At most, they're probably 40 to 100 hours of research and experimentation away from you. So being skilled at something or having knowledge in some subject area like Docker, the basics of web infrastructure, peer-to-peer video technologies, it's just a couple of weekends of work and playing around away. And I think that's very powerful. Case in point, I knew absolutely nothing about WebRTC or peer-to-peer calling. Googled some stuff, ran some projects, built Zipcall in about 2 weeks, and about a month later, someone from Facebook was like, "Hey, we like what you built. We think this is really cool. We want you to come and talk about WebRTC and what you built with this." Which I'm like, what the hell? Who wants to listen to me? But that's kind of how low the bar is. And I don't think a lot of people realize it, that everyone is kind of just faking it and Googling it and just kind of rolling with the punches. So all this building led to this particular moment. And I remember this so clearly. This was about 11 p.m. on a Friday night. This is what I like to call the aha moment. This is my mom reading me a bedtime story. And she was about 500 miles away, living in the US, it's a different country at the time. And this is when I realized there was something here. This is when I realized Zipcall had some value. So there's 2 reasons why I think the aha moment is very important. Number one is it's extremely motivating, right? You see this and it's right in front of you. It's very apparent why this is something that the world needs, and why this is something that you should work on. So it's going to get you up in the mornings. I think that's really important, right? Like we need reasons to wake up in the morning. We need things that we're excited about. And it's not always going to be sunshine, rainbows, and happiness. So having something concrete that can help reinforce that will just keep you going. And the second is helps reinforce your product. When you have this MVP that's giving you that aha, it's like, okay, this is the value here. This is why I had this idea. This is what I'm going to ship out. But not so fast. I had that aha moment, yes, but it was very, very broken. There was lots and lots and lots of more features that I needed to add in. I had to support multiple rooms. I had to elegantly handle disconnects. I had to do auto scaling video quality. I had to implement text chat. There's even more work. I had to buy a domain. I had to host a server. I had to built-in support for Safari. I had to handle multiple audio inputs. There's all these things that when you're working on MVP and just trying to get something that's fun and suitable for more like a hackathon or a POC, a proof of concept environment, that you don't think about. So that's the other reason why the motivation is important. There's a whole crap ton of tickets that are going to pile up before you get to something that anyone's reasonably going to actually want to use. But after all of this, stuff is starting to shape up. Got a landing page, the website's looking pretty good, and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna start using it with my friends. Let me start to share it around and see what happens. And I got a lot of feedback. People were saying things like, how do I hang up the call? How does someone else join? It never connected. What is this even for? It keeps on disconnecting. And this leads me to, in my opinion, one of the most important things in product development when you're making things that are consumer facing. And it's this notion of feedback and fix. Specifically in software development, there is this feedback loop that happens between users, product managers, and software developers. The way it works in a typical big company is enough people complain about a product, whether it's on a forum or through some direct feedback, like submission. Some product manager somewhere says, hey, this is cool, we should either implement this or this is a problem. They then triage it into a ticket. It goes to product designers, so then it takes them 2-3 weeks to design it and get it done, and then it goes to software engineers who implement it. It takes time, and then it goes through QA and testing. They then have to slowly roll it out to people. So that entire period can be like 4 months. And unfortunately, in big tech, that is not the exception. That is the norm. It's an extremely drawn out process. So by the time you have that valuable information, it's months until most companies will act on it. And this is your competitive advantage when you're really small and you're really young. So the tighter you can get this, the more you can listen to your users, the better off you're going to be, and the quicker you're going to get to a product that people are going to find very attractive and very sticky. For Zipcall, I remember I would always tell people like, hey, let's check out Zipcall. Like, let's hop on a call, walk me through the product. Like, what's going on here? Explain this to me. And I just have them use it. And I'd be sitting there coding mid-call, and I'd be pushing code to the server right to their browser. That might be a little bit crazy. So maybe that feedback loop doesn't need to be real time, but if it's on the order of magnitude of like days and not months or weeks, that's probably a good thing. And the other thing that all this user testing and thinking about feedback a lot showed me, it helped me answer this question: what is Zipcall? What is the point? Like, why should people care? Because a lot of people are asking, like, okay, why don't I just use Zoom? And it wasn't really clear to me at that point. But when I had enough people tell me their values, I was like, okay, here's why. It's browser-based, it's easy to use, it's powered by peer-to-peer, which I didn't really think people would care about, but a lot of people from the developer community would use it just for that reason, because they thought it was very interesting, which surprised me. And lastly, it was end-to-end encrypted. I did not see this as a selling benefit. I did not think most people would care about this, but this was in the middle of the Zoom, when Zoom was getting a lot of flack for its security policies. So it ended up being quite an appealing feature. So that's the other thing you're going to get from users when you listen to them really, really closely. From here, I shared it with the world. So for my friends, I got around 1,000 users just from word of mouth. And then I decided to post it to Reddit. That was it. I was like, why not? Like that's a pretty good way to do marketing, right? Let me just post this to r/JavaScript, r/Entrepreneur, and a couple other places. Got around 10,000 users on the first day from that. So pretty big spike. One thing I'll mention here, because a lot of people ask me, how do you get so many users for pretty much for free with not that much effort? And I think the answer a lot of people want to hear is it's some type of growth hack, and I guess it is. Most of these ranking algorithms rely on acceleration. So if we think about GitHub, where Zipcall's #1 project on GitHub for like 5 days straight on the GitHub trending, that is, which gave it tens of thousands of users probably. in terms of traffic. If you're a project on GitHub, you have this notion of stars. Stars is a pretty loose way to quantify how popular your code is, how much people care. If you're a project that has 5,000 stars and you gain 500 in a day, you go from 5,000 to 5,500, that's great. But when some nobody like me goes from 10 stars to 500 stars a day, that's much more significant. There's that acceleration factor, and GitHub will pick up on that, and most ranking algorithms will. And that rockets you to the front page. And because you're on the front page, you get even more traffic, and that just keeps you on the front page. So it's that positive feedback loop. So that's one thing that I learned from all of this is ranking algorithms can be gamed, and there's definitely an arbitrage opportunity there. But by far, most of the growth, overwhelmingly most of the growth just came from organic. Just users would try it out. One user uses it with two of their friends use it with a couple of theirs. And that's one benefit of a video calling tool is it's inherently social. But it's also a really great metric to understand if people like what you're building. Is it growing organically? If you build something really crappy, you might get 10,000 users in your first day from people trying it out. But if they don't keep sharing it, it's going to fizzle out. And that's not really great. But this all kind of ignores the big elephant in the room. This was in the middle of a global pandemic when everyone was really upset at Zoom and looking for better video calling options. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And it's really hard to predict these things. Zoom could have gone through a crazy outage and Google could have gone down for weeks, and that could have, rocketed Zipcall even higher, or there could have been, 10 new competitors entering the space doing the exact same thing. It's hard to tell. But the only way you're going to ever get anywhere is by putting your foot in the door and seeing what happens. All right, we got all these users, we're getting some growth. What's the next step? Profit? So after launch, or at least after the public launch, pretty much after I posted on Reddit, what ensued was the 7 craziest days of my life. This was what my calendar looked like about 12 hours after posting it. This was the next day. And most of these people are some type of investor, or they're some high profile person in tech, or someone else, just people who want to talk to me, which was crazy. At this point, I didn't know how to say no, because I just figured, hey, if they want to talk to me, I'll listen. But over the course of the next 7 days, I had around 20 venture capital firms reach out. I was informally offered over $1 million in seed funding to raise a round of capital, essentially to build Zipcall, which is just mind-boggling. I'm not saying this because I think I'm so great and Zipcall is amazing. Quite the contrary. I think it just shows how much capital there's floating around in the world. Which leads me to my fourth myth, is that raising capital is the hardest part of building a startup. That is not true. That is just ridiculous. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, but Silicon Valley especially, it's a bit of a bubble right now. And there is so much funding going around. It's unbelievable. And if anything, COVID has just made that grow even more, because people are very wary of public markets. So people are looking for alternative modes of investing. So there's a lot more money out there than I would say qualified companies. Yeah. And I'm just going to bring this up quickly because a lot of people ask me kind of the details. I can't go into too much because I'm under a pretty tight NDA, but I did end up selling Zipcall. And people wonder, how does that happen? What does that look like? Does some guy with a giant briefcase of cash just come up to my house? While it would have been awesome, the answer is no. What it looked like for me anyways was some group of, a couple of guys from this one company, they emailed me, they're like, hey, we really like what you're building. We see that there's some market validation for what it is. We think the tech's great. We want to buy it. And that was kind of it. I asked a couple other people who wanted to invest if they wanted to submit some negotiating offers. There was a bit of back and forth, but that was kind of how it was. Lawyers went back and forth for a bit. Contracts were signed, but at the end of the day, it was pretty straightforward. And this is absolutely not an outcome that I expected. That's one thing I want to say. I did not see any of this coming. I built Zipcall purely for myself, purely as a selfish endeavor. So you really never know where these things are going to go. So some concluding thoughts from Zipcall and all these shenanigans. The first is I think it's really important that you build a product that you want to use. It's much easier to build something that you like and you enjoy and you understand the niche very, very well, as opposed to building theorizing about what someone might want. Second, capital is easy, ideas are hard. If you have a great idea and you are competent with it in even a limited capacity, you can probably raise capital. Third, I think it's really important to fail and learn fast. if I came in saying, oh, I don't understand anything about video calling, I don't understand anything about peer-to-peer, I would have never gotten off my feet. The same way that, if I came with this hubris of, I know everything, I don't think that, this is possible, I know the best way to do it, I'm not going to listen to my users, nothing would have happened or ever gotten off the ground. So it's very important that you learn and you think a lot about what it is that you're doing. Fourth is to listen to your users. At the end of the day, they're your bread and butter. So you have to make sure you take care of them, and hopefully they'll take care of you. Fifth is consistent growth over growth hacking. I know I did a bit of growth hacking, and that certainly was beneficial, but if you get 10,000 users and it fizzles out, who cares? I'm much more interested in the product that gets 1,000 users and grows by 20% every single month because the product is so awesome, and your users are sharing it with their friends. And lastly, just ship something. At the end of the day, it's, looking back at this, I'd love to say that I had all of these ideas and these ambitions for Zipcall, but I didn't. I just shipped something and I got lucky, and I just kind of went with the river and saw where it took me. So shipping something is probably the most important thing. And that's one of the lessons I want you to take away. And hopefully the next thing I want to convince you of is why you need a big side project, if you're not already convinced. And obviously you're convinced in some capacity because you're going to a hackathon, which I think is awesome. The first reason why you need a big side project is you get to learn new technologies and become a better engineer. I've probably learned more from building Zipcall, deploying Zipcall, scaling and doing all of that stuff than I have from any computer science course I've taken at Waterloo. Like very easily, that's just unequivocally true. The second is it's incredible for career development. I don't think I've done anything in my life that's done more for my career than launching Zipcall. No GPA, not taking any class, not going to really any university. Having a big side project is probably one of the biggest hacks, I would say, to start getting interviews at big tech companies. So I think that's a very important thing to notice. Third, you break into open source. It's a great community, ton of smart people there, and it's a lot of fun. Fourth, you gain invaluable connections. I have connections now at some very powerful VC firms. I know people from publicly traded, some executives from publicly traded companies. I've met 15-year-olds who have bananas startups. The entrepreneurial world is very wild, and if you get the chance to dip your toes into it, I highly recommend. And lastly, and most importantly, it's a lot of fun. I think if a lot of people try it out, I think they'd really enjoy it. And with that, I'll say the hardest part is getting started, but you're already here. You guys got this. So start building. I hope you guys all have an amazing Hack the North. You guys build some great stuff. And whoever builds, Zipcall 2.0 that does, 100 times better, remember me and let me buy some equity. And if you want to talk to me, if you want to reach out, the best way is on LinkedIn. You can just search my name. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm happy to talk about both on LinkedIn, but also now, because I'll take questions for as long as people want. We got a couple minutes. I'm very happy to talk about side projects, finding product market fit, internships, and all things tech. Yeah, okay. I'll start taking a look at the hop-in chat. Okay, so Robert asks, why didn't I continue? This is a question that I asked myself a lot, and there was a lot of stress when I was deciding, because when you're 19 and someone says, here's $300,000, go drop out of school and build this, it's pretty tough. But the conclusion I kind of came to was $300,000 for a VC firm, it's not a lot of risk, right? They write those checks out like nothing, and they expect to lose 95% of the time. Whereas for me, taking a year off of school or dropping out of school and putting everything on hold is a ton of risk. And maybe I'm too risk averse, but I wasn't that bullish on the long-term profitability. Yeah, that's kind of why I didn't do that. Why do you gotta put the question slide? Kevin asks, how do you decide between selling your project versus keeping your project versus just working on it? That's a good question. I think it depends what you think the potential upside is, and what's the odd, what are your odds of success? Like, if because starting a startup is quite risky. And if someone offers you a decent amount of cash and you're like, all right, I don't think this company is really going anywhere, you should probably take the cash. But the other thing that's very important is to know when to exit, because it might be better to exit a year later. So it totally depends. I was kind of at the point where it wasn't clear what the path to profitability was. So the value, I don't think, was really increasing as much as it could be. And the hype was starting to die down. Users were still growing, but yeah, it's a tough question. And I struggle with that a lot. Nicholas asked, did you have any ideas before Zipcall that failed or were less huge? I've made a lot of dumb stuff at hackathons. I'll say that. I haven't launched anything super publicly though. Yeah, so again, it's luck. It's you gotta just shoot stuff out there and see what sticks. Taha asks, how did your company make profit and revenue for the investors? Sorry if this is a dumb question. No, that's a great question. And that was one of the reasons why, if Zipcall was a cash cow and it was making tons of money, I probably would have kept it. I probably would have let it keep scaling up. But Zipcall was 100% free to use. It wasn't even ad-based, which is a huge reason why it scaled up so quickly. It's because people didn't have to put in a credit card. Okay, how do you get started if you don't really know many technologies? Like I said, I think figuring out what it is you want and starting really small and just trying to run something on GitHub. So let me think of an example. If you want to learn Node, right? Google Node, like Node Hello World on GitHub, and just clone the project. So like git clone whatever the URL is, and follow the README and just try and get it running. And once you have it running, try deleting a file. Oh, that broke something. Try looking at the actual text, like, what does this string do? I think that's probably the quickest way to learn, rather than trying to read documents. Like, I've never read a programming book or anything like that. I'm sure there's lots of great ones. Who knows, maybe if I did, maybe my marks would be better, but I don't think it's necessary. Where is my workshop chat? How did you power through the struggles and failures when you were building Zipcall? How did you cope with the tough times? It was very stressful. Like the worst, I'll say probably like the least enjoyable part of Zipcall was when it got popular. Like the best times was that 2-week period when I would just wake up at 7 a.m. and code till like 2 a.m. nonstop and just build and build and build. That was the most fun. Once VC firms started reaching out to me and trying to throw money and talk like, hey, what's your business plan? What's your, what's your IP property and all this stuff? I was like, oh, I don't know. That's when it got a little bit rough. And I just kept building. I just kept trying to think, how can I make the product better? And I think if that's like your default mode is trying to make a better product, you'll probably end up okay. So yeah, people are asking, yeah, how did you manage to sell open source code? So it's kind of weird, and I can't go into the details too much. And I certainly agree, it's really weird. But the company I sold to, they wanted exclusive use for it for one of their private products. They wanted a couple other things, but another huge part of it is selling the domain. Like if a domain has 10,000 people visiting a month, there's tremendous value there. And also the actual Zipcall brand, or whatever your startup is, could have a lot of value to someone. Another thing I'll say is be very careful when you put stuff on GitHub, because this, like, if I didn't make GitHub open source, I probably could have gotten a lot more money for it, or I could have saved myself a lot of trouble. So before you just randomly put stuff public on GitHub, if you think that there's a potential that it might go big, I would think twice and understand how open source licenses work. Okay, someone asks, how do you get an idea for a startup? What are the ways you can trigger a startup's a side project idea? Like I said, think of things that bother you in your current life. Like, what is a struggle that you have that you wish that you could solve? That is probably the most basic question I think I would answer. And I was really annoyed with video calling. I was like, this is just stupid. I want to make something better. Let me see let me just try it out. And it ended up working. Mm. Someone asks, can you comment a bit about what types of things you should look out for when deciding the time to release a product? Like what times would the market give you a higher chance of success? I'm I'm not that interested in the market personally. Like, okay, it's important to listen to them, but like that's very much like deciding if your idea is good and whether or not you should build something. As far as if you have an idea and you're building it out. I think the most important thing there is just like, do you want to spend more time trying to further refine the product versus versus just getting out there and seeing what happens? Because if I spent another month trying to build Zipcall and make it perfect, first of all, I probably wouldn't have made it perfect. I probably would have just made it more bloated doing random stuff. So probably wouldn't have even gotten that much better. I also would have lost out on that rare opportunity, and I would have just wasted time. So it's a balance, right? So I say launch quickly, but you don't want to launch too fast. It's a balance like everything else. Why am I still in school? I sold Zipcall, but like not like you're not gonna see me driving a Lamborghini around campus. Like maybe I've overhyped this too much. How did this side project affect your co-ops at Waterloo? I think I think my interview rate has gone through the roof because of it, even with COVID. So it's been phenomenal for me. I've been extremely fortunate to have all this stuff happen. And I think this is replicable, honestly. And that's kind of what my point here is. Like, I think a lot of people can achieve something very similar. And if you're not getting interviews at a lot of these places, and you're like, what the hell? Like, I'm trying my best. Making a big side project, having something to show for it, might just be an answer. And it's probably a lot easier than getting like a 4.0 GPA or getting into Stanford. Someone's asked, for publishing apps, do you suggest selling apps or putting ads in the app? It depends what it is. So if you want rapid growth, like if you want users to have as little user friction as possible, actually in the beginning, I wouldn't even have ads, like period. Like until you're at the point where you're going to make like $500, like $1,000 a month of ads, don't have ads. Just try and get more users. And maybe once you have a great product and people love it and you have a lot of users, so you're at the top of some type of ranking algorithm, people can actually discover you, whether that's through social media or the app store. Then you can start charging or putting in ads. As for which one to choose, it totally depends on what the product is. Like if you're offering a social media, I highly doubt you get away with making people pay $10 a month to use some type of Facebook for dogs. I don't think people would like that very much. When it comes to tech, generally people expect more for less. So you kind of have to keep with that status quo if you want to get a lot of users. All right, so a couple of peer-to-peer questions. With peer-to-peer streaming, were you able to keep costs much lower? Were you prepared for the fast increase in number of users? Did you experience any specific issues with scaling servers? I think the funniest thing is, I think the heaviest day was something like 40,000 users, something like that. And all of this is running on the $7 Heroku. Actually, yeah, the $7 Heroku that you all get for free if you're a student has half a gigabyte of memory. It's literally less powerful than your iPhone. That's the beauty of peer-to-peer. Yeah, and that was one of the things that a lot of the investors and people who were less technical and didn't fully understand peer-to-peer were like, oh my God, this is powerful. Whereas something like Google Meet, which has a centralized server, or Hopin, actually interviewed for Hopin. They liked Zipcall, which I thought was funny. It costs like pennies or dollars on the hour. It's very expensive to run a video server because you need high compute because you have to do encoding and decoding in real time, as well as you need a ton of bandwidth to send all of that. No, Hopin actually was like, they didn't want an intern. They were like, talk to us when you're going full time. I was like, okay. No, Hopin didn't work out, but they're lovely people, nice guys. How do you market your project? I like Reddit. Reddit worked really well for me, but I got a very interesting response. It was very binary. Whenever I would make a post, I either would get downvoted to hell because people were like, "Oh my God, you're self-promoting," which was like fair enough. Like I was like that was my goal, or people would upload a lot. She's like, hey, this 19-year-old kid built something kind of cool. Like, let's try it out. Like, look at this. Yeah. I don't see any other questions. I don't see. If I miss something, you might want to just send it again. But yeah, feel free to ask me about internships or anything like that. Done a good amount of those, done a decent amount of interviews. If I could rewind time and do this again, what would you change? Would you ask someone to lend you a hand? Okay, well, the fact that I exited changes things a lot, right? Because if I have two people that join me, there goes 66% of the take home. So financially, there isn't a great incentive. But I know when I just was building the damn thing, I really wish I had a co-founder, like a ton, because people would send me all these messages and it was like, do I do this? Do I not do this? And I just would get stuck in my head and not have anybody to, I would not have anyone to counsel with. So I definitely think if you're going to do something big, having a co-founder is a great idea. Because honestly, like the odds of someone exiting is like pretty low. Not to like try and like put a damper on anything. So like that probably shouldn't be your goal. Like just getting like a ton of users is like phenomenal. And that'll do tons for your career, and it's just fun. At what point did you realize oh wait, I actually have something pretty cool here? Well, the first aha moment was when I sent that link to my mom, because it was like I sent her an email, and 30 seconds later she's on a call with me. I was like, whoa, that was cool. And I'd never used a video calling software that was that fluid, that simple to use. That was the first one. The second one was I launched on Reddit, and I literally saw like the users just go up. I stayed up until like 5 a.m. that night just watching the users like go up and up and up on Google Analytics. Like I didn't sleep very well that first couple of days. When did you start learning how to code? I started in grade 10. Yeah, I started in grade 10 because just was like some high school programming class. Yeah, there's a funny story there. Maybe I can tell later. In your opinion, what is the most important aspect of internships? Is it the coding portion? I think in the beginning, so I'll tell you what it's not. It's definitely not pay. Like I came to, like I paid for all my tuition. I had to take out debt. So like, trust me, I know what it's like to not have money and like have to cook all your meals and be like, oh God, like, rent is expensive, but it's probably not pay. Like if someone in Canada is offering you 19 versus like $27 an hour or $40 an hour, that shouldn't be the deciding reason, not in the beginning. Things that are more important are how much are you going to learn in terms of technologies, and I would just say the people you're around. Like if you're around a lot of people, if you're around a bunch of interns who are really, really smart, that is like super beneficial for me. Like I interned at Deloitte for my first internship, and there's a ton of smart interns there. And like someone went to like Amazon, someone went to Facebook, and just the actual code quality that they put out was very high. And I think I learned a lot of that just by being very close to them. So that was very beneficial for me. I might say like clout. I think clout is pretty useful. As like controversial as that may sound, like in the beginning when you're just trying to get your foot in the door, having big names is actually quite useful because it lets people kind of validate, okay, this guy's not, some nobody. I wouldn't worry about technologies though. Don't be like, oh, this place I'm gonna do Python versus this place I'm gonna do C++. Like that's a small detail. Real question: Vim, Sublime, or VS Code? Out of those three, VS Code, but I actually use JetBrains products. So I use like IntelliJ and all that stuff. Probably gonna get a lot of flack for that. People are like, oh, you're not a real developer. You use an IDE. Well, you know what? Like, I don't care. I opened Vim once and I had to buy a new computer because I couldn't get out of Vim. What languages and frameworks did you use? Feels like a calling software is super complicated to code. Well, 10 years ago, yeah, it would have been. But I used WebRTC for this. Front end was regrettably jQuery, should have been React. WebRTC, Socket.io for all the WebSocket stuff. Backend was Node, Express. No database was pushed to Heroku. It was actually like all of Zipcall is like a couple thousand lines of code. Like it's quite small. Yeah. Do I prefer PM co-ops or developer co-ops? Is there a lot of overlap between those two positions? It depends. So my first co-op was at Deloitte, and we were an innovation lab. So pretty much we were building prototypes. We didn't have a PM, so I would say I had a good amount of control over where the product went. Like, should we implement this feature? How should this look? That's kind of like what the stuff at PM does. Like they're brainstorming brainstorming features, sorry. But when I was at Shopify, it was a much bigger place. And it kind of was like, all right, we already have an idea what the product is. It's very refined. You know, it gets like like millions of users a month. So how much you can actually do as a developer, like how much influence you have over that, is much more limited. I don't know if I prefer PM or dev. I like coding a lot, but I like products too. I think I'm going to stick to coding for now. Yeah, I think developer co-ops are probably better for me, but they're both great. I don't think you can go wrong with either. How do you manage a side project with school, work, and other important things simultaneously? If you find out, let me know, please. Like, I would love to know the answer to this. But I think, okay, seriously though, I think the answer is probably to understand what your goals are in life. Like for me, I realized pretty quickly that letting Zipcall die and, you know, be broken and, you know, deal with all the negative consequences of not properly managing it would be much higher than the cost of, I don't know, maybe if I'm not working, you know, 60 hours a week in my co-op, not going as hard, or if I only get like a 65 on some computer science assignment versus like an 85. Because like it's just a value thing. Like, would I rather have an 85 on this assignment, or would I rather, you know, have Zipcall be a little bit better and not crash and have all these other issues? What did I do when I get stuck in coding? Cry. But seriously though, Stack Overflow and just keep Googling. Number one strategy I'll say that I think young developers can learn a lot from is trying to get back to trying to get the problem down to its most basic form. So if you're like, okay, this project doesn't work, it's like, okay, fine, what part doesn't work? Okay, this feature doesn't work. All right, what part crashes? And you just kind of keep doing that through like printing logs or debug statements until you find the exact line. It's like, oh, all right, I was never actually connected to the database, as opposed to just thinking, when I try and, you know, make a post on my app, the post never works. So finding the exact part that doesn't work is generally a pretty good way to start. And then Googling that. That'll get you out of like 80% of the errors. And 90% of the time when I'm sitting there banging my head on the wall, I'm like, oh my God, if I just like followed that process that I just laid out, I could have gotten myself out of this. Do you think high school students should try making startups, or should they wait until uni? Oh, of course. Make this stuff whenever you want. One thing I should mention is like startups versus projects versus products versus side projects. They all start the same. You know, most of the time it's just a group of young people in a garage somewhere with a bunch of laptops making something. Like I met this. Actually, I don't want to talk about him on the internet, but I met this one guy. He was very young and he was doing some very exciting stuff, like way bigger than Zipcall, way cooler. So there's a ton of things that you can do if you just start building stuff. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, what's the cost of trying? Oh no, we built a product that was super cool, and now I've got something awesome to put on my resume. Boo-hoo. Like, maybe if you put like $10,000 into like servers, then you should cry, but that's just, you know, that's kind of just like risk assessment. What are some good sources to learn? Also, what are some good frameworks that you'd recommend learning? For what? Like, if you're young in your career, if you're like a university student, do you have a follow-up for that maybe? For programming, yeah, I got that. But like, if you're like trying to be an intern, it kind of depends. All right, well, I'm not seeing a response to that, so I'll wait for him to come back. This is a great question. I want to talk about this. Have you struggled with imposter syndrome at internships and building Zipcall? 100%. This is like the biggest, might be the most valuable thing for this entire takeaway. Is like, I'm an average person. I go to class, I procrastinate, you know, I stay up till 2 a.m. doing stupid stuff. I'm a normal person who got lucky. And I think everybody else is like me. But I still look around myself all the time and I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like faking it. I'm just Googling shit. Like, I don't really know what's going on. I think that all the time. Why am I hacked north? You see some of these other people? I don't know. But I think you just do your best and focus on trying to belong. And I recognize that, like, Honestly, if anyone should belong in computer science, it's probably me. Like I fit the stereotype. So imposter syndrome is very real. I struggle from that a lot. Yeah, someone suggested I go take a look at YouTube, so I am going to take a look. Let me see. Someone says, how much programming knowledge did you have when starting Zipcall? I'd finished 2 co-ops and I'd finished second year of computer science at Waterloo. Hadn't done anything big like this before. But I think probably more experience building random stuff than the average person. But if you want to learn how to actually ship things and build stuff really quickly, going to a hackathon and finding a team of like 3 other people who are really hungry, that's the fastest way to learn. Like getting high grades in, computer science at whatever your university is, it doesn't teach you how to build Zipcall. It doesn't teach you how to build the next Facebook. It'll teach you how to do math proofs and how to prove that, how to prove that your database is superior to some other database. But it doesn't really teach you how to build stuff. Yeah. If you didn't make it public on GitHub, how did your sponsor reach out to you / have access to your project? I'm not sure what you mean. If you're guessing how I think that they found me to like email me, I was really dumb back then. I had my email on the Zipcall website and like on my personal website, so people could just Google my name or like Google Zipcall and be like, oh, let me write this guy an email. You can't do that anymore because I started getting spam, which is why I tell people to go through LinkedIn, because that's like, not many people want to waste their time making a LinkedIn account. Writes angry email. Oh God, no, I hope I don't get a lot of angry emails about this. Well, Zipcall went down. Well, so when I sold to the company, when I transferred them the domain, it's currently down right now. Like zipcall.io is not up. Like for the life of me, I don't know why. But that day when it went down, I got like dozens of emails being like, hey, what the hell, man? Like I relied on this. Like I set up a call through this. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have the rights to it anymore. It's not mine. Yeah. Don't write me angry emails, please. Let's see. How much leak code do I do? Like none. In my life, I've probably done like 30 or 40 leak code easies and like 10 mediums. Do not talk to me about leak code. I am not the person to ask about that. I am subpar. But leak code is very important. Leak code is, you can get interviews at all these big places, but if you fail all of them because you can't do you can't pass their stupid technical bar, which is very, it's just made up. Leak code's it's very contrived. You won't get in. So leak code is actually important to do. What do you think makes a good intern? Technical skills, or do you think behavioral skills as well? I think the #1 skill is communication. Like that sounds hella corny. But I think if you communicate really well and you're motivated and you ask good questions, and manage expectations, your managers will love you. Like, even if you're not the best programmer, but if one intern is like, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm building, here's what I'm stuck on, here's one question, should I do this, should I do that? And you know how to communicate really effectively, versus the other person who, they might have wrote the book in JavaScript, but if they're building the wrong thing, or you're getting in arguments all the time, that's going to leave a bad taste in people's leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So if you communicate really well and manage expectations, like that's another thing I learned. If you tell people, oh yeah, I can build this, like I can redo the back end in the next 2 days, yeah, that's totally fine. And you might have bit off more than you chew. And if you consistently do that, people don't like that. So it's very important that you understand what's reasonable to ship. And yeah, and then you actually deliver. That's the other thing that's important. Do I think mindset plays a big role for programmers / CS students? You gotta like it. I think that's important. I see this at Waterloo. I think there's a lot of people who are in it for the money, and I think they're very miserable. It's really hard when you're doing stupid math proofs in some course you don't like. Like, why am I here? This is like chewing glass when you're just in it for the money. So I think that's, yeah, mindset's probably important. And I think you have to be a good problem solver. Like you have to be willing to be like, this doesn't work. Is there another way around this? Like, can I kind of figure out another way to approach this? Like, let me take a break. Let me come back to it. You have to be willing to ask a lot of questions, as opposed to a lot of other disciplines where it might be you need a ton of creativity and a ton of focus or whatever. How did you get so many great internships without leak code? Because the internships I had are not very leak code heavy. Deloitte did not ask me. I think they asked for like a leak code easy. It was like, but it's like I didn't do any leak code for that. Accenture, I don't think they asked me any hard leak code questions. Shopify is pretty infamous for asking like more design-based questions, and they care a ton about side projects. So they were really impressed with Zipcall, obviously. And then Coinbase, yeah, Coinbase asks leak code questions, but I guess I just got lucky on that one, or preparation, whatever you want to call it, the same thing. Suggestions on researching companies and finding the internship company for you. So I guess what you're trying to ask here is, which companies should I be targeting? I'll tell you what you probably shouldn't do. After I worked at Deloitte, I thought it was hot shit. I was like, yo, time for my second co-op. I'm gonna go work at Facebook and Google and like Amazon, and these are the only places I'm gonna apply to. I think I applied on Waterloo Works, which is like our job portal where you get matched with employers. You get 50 applications, and I think 45 of them went to like these ambitious American tech companies, and like 5 went to Canadian ones. Yeah, I think I got 1 out of 45 of those interviews, and I got like pretty much all the Canadian ones, but I was like, what the hell? So setting your expectations reasonably, I think is important. Oh, a follow-up though, like the perfect company for you. So finding a company that you're a good fit for. What product do they build? What's the culture like? Because like it's one thing to say, oh, this company's better because it pays more or whatever, and like that comparison will always be there. But culture depends a lot on teams. Like some places are going to go a lot more hard. They're going to be much more of a meritocracy. It's going to be very intense. Like if you work in finance, if you work for Citadel, they work pretty long hours. You really got to show up and perform. But if you do, you'll be rewarded, as opposed to Shopify, which is like, we care about employees. We want to make sure that you're doing okay. It's very much a collaborative environment. So I really like that. That's why I like Shopify. Really great place. And the other part is like the product, finding a product that speaks to you. Like I think blockchain is really cool. I think crypto is fun. So Coinbase makes no sense to me, but maybe you think crypto is really stupid. You think it's a joke or whatever. So Coinbase probably is a great company for you. Because if you find a product that you're really passionate about working on, it's probably going to make you a lot happier to show up to work. Why did I choose to go to Waterloo? Geez, I don't know. I could have gone to a couple other Canadian schools. I didn't apply to American schools, but I think the allure of the co-op program was definitely there, because you're promised all these sweet internships and whatnot, which is true to an extent. Waterloo definitely hands you a lot of internships on somewhat of a gold platter, so I think that was a pretty big motivator. Do I have any experience cold emailing startups? Not startups, but big tech companies. Reasonably big tech companies. Not like, I've never gotten response from like the biggest ones, but like I've cold emailed some, I got an offer from this one California company that was like, I was super hyped. I was like, wow, I didn't think that would work, just because I cold emailed a recruiter and I was like, hey, I built this thing. I like your product. Let me interview. And they're like, oh my God, great. Like your success rate of cold emailing places is a lot higher than most people think. I think it's like a pretty good little hack. Just applying to some company, you have a very low chance of success, but your probability of getting an interview if you just email them, much higher. Do you have any resources to know of when job openings open up on the very first day? There are so many company websites which you can't possibly check every day. For CS internships, there's 2 things that I would consistently use. Number 1 is Google Jobs. And you can set up like different parameters for like notifications. Like if a job is posted, it's like software intern in a specific location, like California or Toronto or whatever, and then you can get like a daily email. That's what I would do when I'm in the kind of grind, and I'll just get that email every day, and I'll just quickly, takes me like 1 minute, I'll skim through it, see if there's any companies I like. If there is, I'll apply to it that morning, rather than waiting like a week to apply. Because if you wait a week, like your odds just go down so quickly. Applying like right when that job application opens up is like extremely important. Because if you think about it from their perspective, if you're a company like, if you're a company that takes like 10 interns and you get 10,000 resumes in the first day, which is pretty reasonable, why would you look at all 100,000 resumes that you got by the end of the week or by the end of the month? Like, it's not worth the effort because you probably already have a lot of really great candidates in those first 10,000 or even 1,000. So being fast is, it's great to be, you know, to be comprehensive. It's great to have high skill, but it's also great to just be fast. If those big American tech companies didn't want you to work there, then who are they accepting? You know what? I don't know. It beats me. I got a referral to Google this term, and I like Zipcall was already pulling big numbers. I didn't even get an interview, so it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck. But at the same time, like there's people who are, you know, maybe less accomplished, whatever that means. Like they might not have the same very obvious statistics that like might say like, like it's pretty easy to look at me and say, okay, yeah, he probably knows how to code in some capacity. But some people don't have that, but they'll get interviews at Google. So it's a numbers game for sure. How would students go about learning about companies, like the culture and other related things? Like you can read like intern blogs and stuff like that. I'm gonna say this and like I'm probably about flack, but like looking on Blind, like it's like teamblind.com. It's kind of like anonymous Reddit, but for tech companies. There's a lot of good information there. It's a little bit toxic and it represents like all the worst things of Silicon Valley, I think, but you can kind of learn a good bit there. How many hours of sleep do I average? More than I used to, like 7.5. Yeah, probably 7. What is your strategy to cold email? How do you find the right person to cold email? Okay, this is actually very algorithmic. So get the pen and paper out. I will literally go to LinkedIn. Like let's say I want to go find someone from like I don't know, like Adobe or something like that. I will set the filter for Adobe. So people who like show me people who only work currently at Adobe, and I search either university recruiter or talent or whatever like they call it. Like sometimes they call it just like HR, like human resources or whatever. Find out whatever they call themselves. But normally it's like campus recruiter or something like that. And then find like the first 10 or 20 people. You get their names. You hop over to a tool that's called hunter.io. Right here, I'll type it out. Hunter.io. You punch in their name and it'll give you their email with the confidence score. But it also tells you the structure of that company. So like when I worked at, for instance, at Shopify, it's first name dot last name at shopify.com. So can you guess what my email was at Shopify? It was ian.ramsey@shopify.com. And this is public info, like you can find this out pretty easily. So if you know people's names, you can find their cold email. And they're not like, and I think a lot of people are very afraid they're going to offend somebody. Like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to cold email them. What if they don't want it? Or what if they ignore it? Fine. Who cares, right? Like go email someone else. Like, oh no, it's a campus recruiter. Their job is to go recruit university kids. You tried to tell them you thought you were a great fit. Do you tailor your resume for each job? No, that's too much time in my opinion. Plus, I'm really only focused on like back-end engineering these days. So it's like I don't have like a front end versus back end job. But maybe if you have like a ton of side projects, you could maybe like have like one that's like more front end focused, one's more back end focused. I do think one thing I do is I do write a cover letter for each company though. But before people say like that's a lot of time, it's really not. It takes me about 60 seconds. I just use a LaTeX template and I change the first 2 sentences to say, here's what I know about your company. Here's why I think you're a good fit for me. And then the rest of it's all the same. And I think that's a pretty good strategy because it shows them that, you know, you do know who the company is. Honestly, I feel that imposter syndrome is the biggest anchor in computer science. I guess fake it till you make it. Yeah, there's books, about this. This is pretty well documented, but at the end of the day, it's like who cares? It's like maybe you don't belong in tech. Maybe you do. Does it matter? Like, do you feel like you should be in tech? And if you want to be in tech, like as far as I'm concerned, like that's all the belonging that you need in the world. At least all the belonging that you should need to feel that you're accepted. The company is it's called Blind, like being blind. Be careful though. Blind is it's kind of a cesspool. I will check out, see if there's anything on YouTube. Are you planning on building another project next? And do you have a mentor of any sort? Do you think it's necessary for guidance? Or do you think it's better to learn from experience? I think mentors are very helpful. I did not have a mentor, no, but I did have a lot of very knowledgeable people reach out to me in kind of the tech community who are like building similar things, and like they had some very cool products. I think mentors are great if you can find one, because it can save you a lot of time. Like if I could find like first year Ian or high school Ian and just like slap him back and forth a couple times, be like, all right, this is what you do. Like here's like a 1 page with bullet points, and like here's how you get shit done, and like this is like kind of the game plan. That would have been very beneficial. But it's hard, right? Like it's hard to find mentors. One other question. You have the Hopin link. I can't access it. I don't think someone asked that on YouTube. I think you need to be in the event to have access to Hopin. So you have to like have gone to Hack the North. Oh. Yeah. All right. I'll see if there's any more questions, but I think this is going to be final call. My throat's getting a little sore. I'm glad. I hope somebody wants to go build, scale up some side project. And when you do, don't forget me. Like I said, I want some of that pre-IPO equity. Alrighty, it's been fun, guys. I wish you all the best. Good luck to Hack the North. Stay easy.